My fiance cheated on me with my sister, then invited me to their wedding. So I showed up with the My name is Nicole Carter, and 6 months ago, I had it all figured out: a corner office at Merrill Lynch, a two-bedroom apartment in Russian Hill with a view of the Bay Bridge, and a fiance who supposedly loved me more than life itself. I was that woman who color-coded her calendar, meal prepped on Sundays, and had a 5-year plan meticulously mapped out in a leather-bound journal. But life has a twisted sense of humor, and mine fell apart with one misplaced phone and a series of texts that were never meant for my eyes. "You still taste like cinnamon," the message read. "Can't wait for tomorrow. N will be in Chicago until Thursday." N. That's me. Nicole. The fiancé who was supposed to be safely tucked away in a conference room 2,000 miles from San Francisco while my sister slept with my future husband. I didn't cry when I first saw the message. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching someone else's life implode. I scrolled up through the conversation history between Ashton and Veronica, my sister, dating back 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of betrayal happening right under my nose. There were photos I'll never be able to unsee. Secret meetups while I worked late. Inside jokes about how oblivious I was. And the worst part, conversations about my own wedding, the one I was planning with Ashton, with my sister offering opinions on venues I'd excitedly texted her about. I waited up all night for Ashton to come home. At 2:17 a.m., I heard his key in the lock. He was whistling, actually whistling, as he walked in, smelling like expensive perfume and guilt. "Nick, you're back early." His voice faltered when he saw me sitting in the dark, his phone on the coffee table between us. "You forgot this at home," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "Veronica's been quite persistent with her messages." His face went through the predictable evolution: confusion, shock, fear, and finally, that pathetic attempt at damage control that cheaters always default to. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." I cut him off. 6 months, Ashton, with my sister. My sister. My voice finally cracked on the last word. What followed was the kind of conversation that changes who you are as a person. Ashton admitted everything, not because he was honorable, but because the evidence was irrefutable. He told me it started at my parents' anniversary party, of all places. A drunken mistake that became a sober choice, repeated over and over. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, the ultimate cliché. "And yet, here we are," I replied, sliding my engagement ring across the table. "Pack your things. I want you gone by morning." In the morning, he was gone. So was the half-empty bottle of Macallan 18 we'd been saving for a special occasion. Apparently, the end of our engagement qualified. The worst part wasn't losing Ashton, it was losing my sister. Veronica was 3 years older, the golden child who'd always shined a little brighter, achieved a little more, commanded attention a little easier. Growing up in her shadow had shaped me in ways I never fully acknowledged. I'd spent a lifetime trying to earn the approval she seemed to attract effortlessly. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I disappeared from both their lives, ignoring calls and texts that evolved from frantic explanations to angry accusations. How dare I not give them a chance to explain? How could I be so cold? My best friend Lily was my savior during those first weeks. She moved into my spare room, forced me to eat when food felt like an impossible task, and never once suggested that I hear them out or try to understand. She knew some betrayals cut too deep for reconciliation. "They don't deserve your forgiveness," she said one night as we split a bottle of wine on my balcony. "But you deserve to heal anyway." So that's what I focused on: healing. I threw myself into work, promoted to senior investment strategist 3 months ahead of schedule. I started therapy with Dr. Bennett, who never told me how to feel but helped me understand why I felt it. I renovated my apartment, painting over the sage green walls Ashton had insisted on with a crisp, clean white. I was rebuilding, slowly but surely, until a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox, embossed with gold lettering that made my stomach drop before I even opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation, Veronica and Ashton's wedding invitation. "They can't be serious," Lily gasped when I showed her. "This has to be some kind of sick joke." But it wasn't a joke. It was a calculated move, a power play designed to show me they'd moved on, that they were happy, despite my refusal to give them my blessing. The wedding was set for exactly 1 year after Ashton had proposed to me, at the same vineyard in Napa where we'd once talked about getting married ourselves. The invitation even mimicked the design I'd saved to my Pinterest board, the one I'd shared with Veronica during one of our sister brunches. "I'm going," I announced to Lily that night. "You're what?" She nearly choked on her pad thai. "I'm going to their wedding," I repeated, a strange calm settling over me. Not for them, for me. I need to prove to myself that they don't have power over me anymore. Lily studied me for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "If you're going, we're doing this right. Operation Glow Up starts tomorrow." And that's how I found myself, 3 months later, embarking on what Lily dubbed the ultimate revenge attendance. It wasn't about winning Ashton back, I'd sooner date a subway rat. It was about reclaiming my narrative, refusing to be cast as the pathetic ex they'd so easily discarded. Operation Glow Up was comprehensive, a personal trainer who helped me sculpt the body I'd always wanted but never prioritized. A wardrobe overhaul that reflected the woman I was becoming rather than the one I'd been. And weekly sessions with Dr. Bennett to ensure my mental health remained the priority. "Remember," Dr. Bennett cautioned during one session, "revenge is a powerful motivator, but it's a terrible end goal. Make sure you're doing this for yourself, not to hurt them." I took her words to heart, focusing on my own healing, even as I prepared to face my betrayers. But there was one element of the plan that still eluded me: a date. "You can't go alone," Lily insisted. "Not because you need a man, but because they're expecting you to be sad and single. We need to flip the script." She was right. But I wasn't about to bring some random +1 to an event this emotionally charged. It had to be someone genuine, someone who wouldn't make me feel like I was playing the same deceitful games they had. That's when fate intervened in the form of a charity gala for San Francisco's youth arts programs. As a major donor, I was seated at a table with the city's professional elite, including Evan Thompson, founder of Thompson Architectural Design, and, as Lily whispered when he stepped away from the table, certified smoke show who just made the 40 under 40 list. Evan was undeniably attractive, with dark hair that had a mind of its own and the kind of smile that transformed his entire face. But what caught my attention wasn't his looks, it was his authenticity. In a room full of people trying to impress each other, he asked genuine questions and listened to the answers. When we were introduced, his handshake was firm, his eye contact unwavering. "Nicole Carter," he said, as if committing my name to memory. "You helped secure funding for the Mission District Youth Center, right?" I was surprised he knew about my pet project. "I did. How did you know that?" "I designed it," he replied with a humble shrug. "Your investment made a significant difference in what we could offer those kids." Our conversation flowed naturally from there, touching on everything from architecture to finance to our shared love of obscure documentary films. By the time dessert arrived, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine connection. As the evening wound down, Evan handed me his card. "I've enjoyed talking with you, Nicole. I'd love to continue the conversation sometime." I hesitated, years of mistrust suddenly bubbling to the surface. "I should probably tell you I'm coming out of a complicated situation." He nodded, his expression softening. Aren't we all mine involved finding my fiancé in bed with my business partner 2 years ago? The frankness of his admission stunned me. That's awful. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said with a gentle smile. It led me here. Having dinner with someone who doesn't look at her phone every 5 minutes and actually listens when I talk about sustainable building materials. I laughed despite myself. The bar is truly on the floor. It really is, he agreed. So, that conversation. I took his card, feeling something unexpected hope. Maybe. I'd like that. Over the next few weeks, Evan and I met for coffee, then dinner, then a Sunday spent wandering through the De Young Museum. Our connection deepened with each meeting, built on honesty and shared experience rather than the desperate need to move on that had characterized my few attempted dates since Ashton. When I finally told him about Veronica and Ashton and the wedding invitation that still sat on my desk like a ticking bomb, he listened without interruption, his expression shifting between disbelief and empathy. That's monumentally messed up, he said when I finished. I can't imagine inviting my ex to witness my marriage to her sister. To be fair, I don't think imagination is their strong suit, I replied, surprising myself with the joke. Creativity would require some level of moral complexity. Evan laughed, then grew serious. So you're really going to the wedding? I am, alone, probably, which will only reinforce their narrative about poor, abandoned Nicole. He was quiet for a moment, considering. What if you weren't alone? I looked at him, surprised. Are you offering to be my revenge date to my sister's wedding to my ex-fiancé? When you put it that way, it sounds like the plot of a bad romantic comedy, he said with a grin. But yes, I am. Not for revenge, though I won't pretend it wouldn't be satisfying to see their faces when you walk in with someone new. I'm offering because I like you. Nicole, I'd like to keep getting to know you, and I think having someone in your corner that day might make it easier to get through. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. You barely know me. Why would you willingly walk into that viper pit? Because I recognize something in you that I've been looking for, he said simply. Strength, integrity, the kind of resilience that comes from being broken and choosing to put yourself back together anyway. I studied him, searching for signs of insincerity and finding none. Okay, I finally said. But fair warning, my family gatherings now come with a side of betrayal and emotional manipulation. He smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. I'll bring the emotional support and devastatingly good looks. And just like that, I had a date to the wedding I never thought I'd attend. The weekend of Veronica and Ashton's wedding arrived with perfect Northern California weather, clear skies, gentle breezes, and temperatures that made outdoor ceremonies a dream. The universe apparently hadn't gotten the memo that it should be raining on these particular nuptials. At 6:30 p.m. on Friday, I stood before the mirror in our hotel room, examining my reflection. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd discovered those texts 6 months ago. My honey blonde hair was now cut into a sleek bob that framed my face in a way my previous long waves never had. The black cocktail dress I'd chosen hugged curves strengthened by months of kickboxing and yoga therapeutic activities that had become genuine passions. But the most significant change was in my eyes clear, steady, no longer clouded by the desperate need for approval that had defined so much of my life. You look incredible, Evan said, appearing behind me in the mirror. He was handsome in dark slacks and a crisp white button-down, his dark hair artfully tousled. So do you, I replied, turning to face him. Ready for Act 1 of this twisted play? He offered his arm with a reassuring smile. Lead the way, Ms. Carter. The welcome reception was held in the vineyard's stone courtyard, fairy lights strung overhead creating a warm glow as the sun began to set. My heart hammered as we approached, but Evan's steady presence beside me kept me grounded. We'd barely stepped into the courtyard when I heard my name, spoken with the particular inflection only my mother could manage, a mixture of surprise and barely concealed judgment. "Nicole, you came." She air-kissed both my cheeks, her eyes fixed on Evan. "And you brought a friend." "Mom, this is Evan Thompson," I said, watching her eyes widen slightly as she recognized his name. My mother was nothing if not attuned to San Francisco's social hierarchy. "Evan, my mother, Eleanor Carter." "Mrs. Carter," Evan said smoothly, taking her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Nicole speaks highly of you." It was a polite lie. I'd actually told him about my mother's passive-aggressive tendencies and her lifelong preference for Veronica. But the charm offensive worked. My mother practically preened. "How lovely! And how did you two meet?" As Evan launched into the story of the charity gala, emphasizing my contributions to the youth center, I caught sight of them across the courtyard, Ashton and Veronica, holding court among a circle of admirers. Ashton looked the same tall, sandy-haired, with the kind of conventional handsomeness that photographed well but became forgettable in person. Veronica was radiant in a white cocktail dress, her dark hair cascading down her back in the waves I'd always envied growing up. They hadn't noticed me yet, too absorbed in whatever story they were telling that had their audience captivated. I took the moment to steady myself, reminding myself why I was here, not for them, but for me. My mother followed my gaze, her expression shifting to concern. "Darling, perhaps we should get you a drink before I see my sister and my ex-fiance together." I finished for her, keeping my voice light. "Too late for that, Mom, but a drink sounds great." It took precisely 12 minutes for them to make their way to us. I counted each second, preparing myself for the inevitable confrontation. Evan sensed my tension, his hand finding the small of my back again, a silent reminder of his support. "Nicole," Veronica's voice was hesitant, almost girlish, the tone she used when uncertain of her reception. "You came." I turned, meeting her gaze directly. My sister, 3 years older but suddenly looking younger, more vulnerable than I remembered, despite everything. A pang of our shared history hit me unexpectedly. "I said I would," I replied simply. "Congratulations." Ashton stood slightly behind her, his expression a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. "Nicole, it's good to see you." I didn't bother to return the sentiment. Instead, I gestured to Evan. "This is Evan Thompson." Recognition flickered in Ashton's eyes. He worked in finance, after all, and Evan's success was well documented. "Thompson Architectural Design," he said, extending his hand automatically. "Your waterfront project is impressive." Evan shook his hand briefly. "Thank you," though not as impressive as Nicole's work with investment strategies for sustainable development. She's revolutionizing how we approach funding for environmental initiatives. The subtle redirect to my accomplishments wasn't lost on anyone. Veronica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How did you two meet?" she asked, her voice overly bright. "Charity gala," I answered before Evan could. Sometimes the best connections happen when you least expect them. The double meaning hung in the air between us. Veronica had the grace to blush. "Well, we're just glad you could be here," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It means a lot. Nicole, really." "Does it?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, my voice soft but direct. Veronica faltered, her composure cracking slightly. Ashton stepped forward, ever the mediator. "Of course it does. Family is important." The irony of him invoking family after what they'd done nearly made me laugh. Instead, I nodded, my expression neutral. "Right. Family." The wedding ceremony the next day was, objectively speaking, beautiful. The vineyard's garden had been transformed with white roses and hydrangeas, rows of gold chairs facing an arch twined with greenery. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything. nature itself conspiring to create the perfect backdrop for my sister's perfect day. Evan and I sat on the groom's side, my choice, meant to create distance from my immediate family, who filled the front rows on the bride's side. From our vantage point midway back, I had a clear view of Ashton as he took his place at the altar, visibly nervous, continuously adjusting his cufflinks. "Ironic that he's wearing blue," I whispered to Evan. "It was supposed to be our wedding color." Evan squeezed my hand. More evidence of their creative bankruptcy. The comment surprised a laugh out of me, earning curious glances from nearby guests. I schooled my expression back to polite interest just as the music changed, signaling Veronica's entrance. She was stunning, there was no denying it. Her dress was a masterpiece of delicate lace and subtle beading, the long train trailing behind her as our father walked her down the aisle. Her dark hair was styled in an elegant updo, tendrils framing her face in what I recognized as a direct copy of the bridal hairstyle I'd saved to my Pinterest board last year. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. Traditional vows, no personalized speeches about their journey or how they found each other. Perhaps even they recognized that the truth of how they came together wasn't something to celebrate publicly. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, I felt a strange sense of detachment. These two people, who had once been the closest to me in the world, now felt like strangers. The betrayal still hurt, but it was a distant ache rather than the sharp agony of 6 months ago. The reception was held in the vineyard's grand hall, a soaring space with stone walls and exposed wooden beams. Each table was adorned with elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the room, highlighting the gold accents that echoed Veronica's wedding colors, gold and cream. Classic and elegant, if completely unoriginal. Our table was positioned just far enough from the head table to be polite, but not close enough for easy conversation, another calculated decision that didn't escape my notice. We were seated with distant cousins and friends of the groom, who clearly had no idea who I was or my connection to the couple. Dinner was a multi-course affair featuring locally sourced ingredients and wine pairings from the vineyard's collection. Under different circumstances, I would have appreciated the attention to detail. As it was, I focused on making conversation with our table mates, a skill I'd perfected through years of corporate events. Evan matched me seamlessly, his charm and wit drawing in even the most reserved dinner companions. By the time dessert was served, he had the entire table laughing at his story about a design project gone hilariously wrong. Our moment was interrupted by the clinking of glasses, the traditional call for the newlyweds to kiss, followed by the announcement that it was time for toasts. I steeled myself, knowing this would be the most challenging part of the evening. The best man went first, delivering a speech that carefully avoided any mention of how Ashton and Veronica got together. Instead, he focused on their apparent compatibility and bright future, raising his glass to two people who were clearly meant to find each other. I maintained a neutral expression, though I felt Evan's hand tighten around mine under the table. Then it was Veronica's turn. She stood, slightly unsteady. She'd been drinking champagne steadily since the ceremony and tapped her glass for attention. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," she began, her words slightly slurred, "especially those who had to overcome their own feelings to celebrate our happiness." Her gaze fixed directly on me, and a hush fell over the room. Beside me, Evan tensed. "My sister Nicole," Veronica continued, raising her glass in my direction. "Always the perfect one, perfect grades, perfect job, perfect apartment." I froze, acutely aware of every eye turning toward me. "But today," Veronica's voice took on an edge I recognized from countless childhood arguments, "I'm the one with the perfect husband." Because Ashton finally realized who he really wanted, not the woman he settled for first, but the one he chose forever. Gasps and uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the room. At the head table, Ashton's face had drained of color. He reached for Veronica's arm, but she shook him off. To finding your true love, she finished, her smile sharp as glass. Even when it's complicated. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat perfectly still, my face burning with humiliation. All my careful composure, all the dignity I'd maintained throughout the weekend, threatened to crumble under the weight of my sister's public evisceration. Then, beside me, Evan stood. "I'd like to say something, if I may," he said, his voice carrying across the stunned room. Ashton nodded weakly, perhaps hoping for a diversion from the uncomfortable scene Veronica had created. Evan raised his glass, his expression calm and collected. "To Nicole Carter," he began, drawing surprised looks from the guests, "who taught me what real grace looks like in the face of betrayal." My heart stuttered in my chest as he continued. "I've known Nicole for a short time, but in that time, I've witnessed something remarkable. A woman who refuses to be defined by someone else's poor choices, who rebuilds herself not out of spite, but out of self-respect." He turned slightly, his eyes meeting mine with unmistakable admiration. "Most people here don't know me, but those who do can confirm I don't settle. I don't compromise on quality, not in my work, not in my life, and certainly not in who I choose to spend my time with." The implications hung in the air, crystal clear to everyone listening. "So, while some might see Nicole as someone's ex," he continued, his gaze shifting briefly to Ashton, who seemed to shrink in his seat, "I see her as my future, not a consolation prize, but an upgrade in every possible way." He raised his glass higher. "To Nicole, the most authentic, resilient, and genuinely extraordinary woman I've ever met. Thank you for allowing me to be your date today. It's been the honor of my life." The room erupted in applause, not the polite kind, but enthusiastic, genuine. I sat stunned, tears pricking behind my eyes as Evan returned to his seat beside me. "Too much," he whispered, suddenly uncertain. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Instead, I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly in silent gratitude. Across the room, Veronica had sunk back into her chair, her triumphant moment thoroughly overshadowed by Evan's elegant response. Ashton stared at us, his expression unreadable. The moment was broken by the wedding planner, who swiftly announced the first dance. As Veronica and Ashton moved to the center of the floor, the attention shifted away from us, allowing me to finally take a breath. "Thank you," I managed finally, my voice barely audible. "That was the truth," Evan said simply. "Every word." Later that evening, I followed Veronica into the restroom after noticing her slip away from the reception, tears in her eyes. I found her standing before the mirror, mascara tracking down her cheeks as she gripped the edge of the sink. She looked up as I entered, our eyes meeting in the mirror. "Come to gloat?" she finally asked, her voice ragged. "No," I replied honestly. "I heard crying." She laughed bitterly. "Always the better person. Perfect Nicole, even when I steal your fiance." I leaned against the wall, studying my sister, really seeing her, perhaps for the first time in years. "Why did you do it, Veronica? Why Ashton? You could have had anyone." She turned to face me, her expression crumpling. "Because he was yours," she whispered. "And you always get the better things." The admission, so naked in its jealousy, stunned me into silence. "You don't even see it," she continued, wiping angrily at her tears. "How easy everything is for you, how people just like you without you having to try. I've been competing with you my entire life, and you don't even notice the race." "There was never a race," I said softly. "That was all in your head." "Was it?" she challenged. "Then why did Mom and Dad pay for your college but tell me to take out loans?" Why did you get the corner office while I'm still stuck in middle management? Why does everything just work out for you? I shook my head, incredulous. Is that really how you see my life? Perfect and easy, Veronica. I worked 2 jobs through college to avoid the loans you complain about. I stayed late every night for 3 years to earn that promotion. Nothing was handed to me. But it all comes so naturally to you, she insisted. Even now you show up with Evan Thompson. For God's sake, do you have any idea who he is? What he's worth? Yes, I know exactly who he is, I replied. He's someone who sees me for who I am, not what I represent or what he can take from me. Veronica's face crumpled again. Ashton's already regretting it. You know, he keeps looking at you, at your date, comparing. A pang of something not satisfaction, but a sad kind of vindication went through me. That's not my problem anymore. It's yours. I know, she whispered, suddenly looking very small in her elaborate wedding dress. I just wanted to win. Just once. I stepped closer, emotion rising in my throat. And do you feel like you won? Veronica? She met my eyes, her own filled with tears. No, she admitted. I feel like I lost my sister, and I'm not sure the trade was worth it. The honesty of her answer caught me off guard. Despite everything, despite the months of betrayal and the public humiliation she'd just attempted to inflict on me, I felt a flicker of the connection we'd once shared as sisters. I can't forgive you, I said quietly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't hate you. Veronica, I just feel sorry for you. Outside the restroom, I nearly collided with Ashton, who was clearly waiting to speak with Veronica. Nicole, he said, reaching for my arm. Can we talk? I stepped back, avoiding his touch. I don't think we have anything to say to each other. Please, he insisted. Just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I nodded. 5 minutes. He led me to a small alcove, away from passing guests. Up close, I could see the strain on his face, the shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. Your date, he began awkwardly. He seems impressive. He is, I agreed, offering nothing more. Ashton ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. I made a mistake, Nicole, a huge mistake. I stared at him, disbelieving. You're saying this on your wedding day, to your bride's sister. He had the grace to look ashamed. I know how it sounds, but seeing you today, seeing how you've moved on, how happy you seem, it made me realize what I threw away. Wow, I said flatly. That might be the most selfish thing you've ever said to me. And that's quite an achievement. He flinched. I deserve that. You deserve a lot worse, I replied. But fortunately for you, I'm not interested in being the person who delivers it. What if I left her? He asked suddenly. What if I ended it right now? Would you No, I cut him off, anger finally breaking through my carefully maintained composure. Absolutely not. You don't get to do this, Ashton. You don't get to cheat on me with my sister, marry her, and then decide you want me back on the same day. That's not how this works. He looked genuinely surprised by my rejection, as if he'd actually believed I might be waiting for him to change his mind. The realization was almost laughable. You never really knew me at all, did you? I said, the truth of it finally hitting me. All those years together, and you never actually saw me. That's not true, he protested weakly. It is, I insisted, because the woman you're describing, the one who would take you back after what you did, she doesn't exist. She never did. You just created a version of me in your head that was convenient for you. His silence confirmed what I'd said. I have to go, I said, straightening my shoulders. Evan is waiting for me. As I turned to leave, Ashton called after me, his voice strained. Are you happy, Nicole? Really happy? I paused, considering the question honestly. I'm getting there, I finally said, and that has nothing to do with you anymore. 6 months later. I found myself sitting across from Evan at a restaurant overlooking the bay, celebrating his latest design award. The evening was perfect candlelight, excellent wine, conversation that flowed effortlessly between serious topics and shared laughter. "I have something for you," Evan said as dessert arrived, reaching into his jacket pocket. My heart skipped a beat as he pulled out a small box, sliding it across the table. "It's not what you think," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "Though I hope someday. But we agreed to take this slowly. And I respect that." I opened the box to find a key, simple, silver, attached to a small architectural sketch of a building I recognized as his latest project. "My new office opens next month," he explained. "This is for the private apartment on the top floor. I'm not asking you to move in, not yet, but I want you to have a space that's yours, whenever you want it. No pressure, no expectations." I turned the key over in my palm, touched by the gesture and what it represented: not possession or control, but possibility, trust, a future being built one careful step at a time. "Thank you," I said, emotion thickening my voice. "This means more than you know." His smile, the one I'd come to treasure over months of dating, warmed me from the inside out. "I think I do know," he said softly, "because having you in my life means more than I ever expected." As we finished our dessert, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced down to see Veronica's name on the screen, a rare occurrence these days. Despite the tentative reconciliation we'd begun at our parents' insistence, the message was brief. "Separating. You were right about everything. I'm sorry, really sorry." I set the phone down without responding, not surprised by the news but still saddened by the predictable outcome. Veronica and Ashton's marriage had been crumbling almost from the beginning, built as it was on betrayal and competition rather than genuine connection. "Everything okay?" Evan asked, noting my expression. "Veronica and Ashton are separating," I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. He reached across the table, taking my hand. "How do you feel about that?" I considered the question honestly. Sad, but not for the reasons you might think. Not because I wanted him back or because I wanted them to fail. Just sad that so much pain came from choices that never needed to be made. Evan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's why I fell in love with you. You know, your capacity for empathy. Even toward people who hurt you deeply." The casual admission of love our first, though the feeling had been growing between us for months, made my heart soar. "You love me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His expression softened, a hint of vulnerability beneath his usual confidence. "Of course I do. I think I started falling the moment you agreed to attend that wedding with me, not out of desperation or spite, but because you wanted to reclaim your own story." I tightened my grip on his hand, suddenly certain of what I wanted to say. "I love you too, Evan. Not because you saved me, or because you're the anti-Ashton. I love you because you see me, really see me, and you let me see you too." Later that night, as we walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the bay, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the discovery that had shattered my world, the grief that had nearly consumed me, and the decision to attend a wedding that by all rights should have broken me completely. Instead, it had freed me not just from Ashton and Veronica's hold on my emotions, but from the patterns of people-pleasing and self-doubt that had defined so much of my life. As Evan's arm slipped around my waist, pulling me close against the evening chill, I rested my head on his shoulder and smiled. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about making others suffer for their mistakes. It's about refusing to let those mistakes define your future. My fiance had cheated with my sister. They had invited me to their wedding, expecting me to decline or to show up alone and humiliated. Instead, I had arrived with my head high and a man by my side who valued me for exactly who I was. But the real victory wasn't Evan, wonderful as he was. The real victory was discovering that I was enough had always been enough, exactly as I was. And that knowledge, more than any revenge could ever provide, was the greatest gift my betrayers unwittingly gave me.